Hey guys, this is ADWCTA. Welcome back. This is the Hades Keepsake guide. It is guide number 2 of 3 planned videos on Hades. The first one is the Pact of Punishment / Heat tier list, and that was over 2 hours long. We're not going to do that again. I mean, we will, but for the next video, for the weapons one, where there's more to talk about. Here, for Keepsakes, there's a little bit less to talk about. It's a little bit more focused. Hopefully we can get it done under 1 hour. I know that's what I kept saying in the Pact of Punishment video and it ended up being 2 hours, but if you notice, even here in our little agenda thing on the upper right corner, there's just kind of less to talk about. If you don't know who I am a Hearthstone streamer, Hearthstone Arena mostly, some Battlegrounds, and together with Merps and ZD Man, we made an algorithm that really captures some fundamental first principles about how card games are made, and I've used some version of that algorithm to do things like with Civ 5, and I am just convinced it's applicable to anything. It's just a bunch of math, right? It's a bunch of it's a model. So I modeled Hades because I've spent over 250 hours in this game now, and it's just something I did for fun. It's a lot simpler than the Hearthstone algorithm because, Hades is not a strategy game. It's not even a multiplayer game. Things are just a lot simpler. You might think it's more complicated because there's spacing issues and stuff, but it's actually remarkably, it's card games are just freaking ridiculous in terms of how complicated the numbers get. But anyway, so I made one, and I'm kind of sharing the results. The algorithm is always a work in progress. I tweak stuff all the time. I've been tweaking this for over a month. It just got into good enough of shape that I thought I'd present it. So if you watch the Pact of Punishment video, and if you haven't, go watch it. That was, like I said, over 2 hours. I think there's a lot of good content in there. It's really helpful to just kind of understand what the Pact of Punishment does and how things stack as well. I may do an update at some point where I look at the Pact of Punishment heats from the top down. Because I did the Pact of Punishment based on the lowest amount of heat you could take, but I may do it as in what is the heat you need to avoid, right? Because there's a lot of negative synergies that could go. I've been told that may be more helpful for high heat runs, whereas the video that I put out is probably more helpful for low heat runs. And I started the game on hell mode, so I've never known super low heat runs and how that experience feels like. But I'm currently at 37 heat with my best weapon, and still clearing bounties for some of the other ones. But I consider myself a mid-heat player. But the algorithm and the model doesn't really care about that, right? That's math. I could be the most terrible player in the world, and I may be less confident that the model is correct because I don't have the feel for it, but the model's still the model. Anyway, that's Pact of Punishment stuff. There's one update to that tier list from the last video. If you remember in the last video, we put Forced Overtime under medium. It was the highest of the medium heat, as in the hardest of the medium heats, but it still wasn't a hot heat, a hard heat. That's because I was going for attack speed off of the Hermes boon. The algorithm works in 2 parts. Part of it is first principles, where I thought it was pretty straightforward, damage, health, that kind of stuff. And then part of it, some of the more complicated stuff, I just took from what Hades' development team gave me, which is in the form of boons, right? They think these are the similar values, and so I kind of pieced that together. But where I could, in a reasonable, without sinking too much time into it, I kind of changed it to first principles, because that's how the game actually works. That's the physics of the game, rather than what the developers think the physics of the game is. And something that I've realized, I've worked on the development side some, I've communicated a lot with balance teams on various games. It's really just that in most gaming companies these days, even very sophisticated ones, their balance team is just trial and error. There's not a great mathematical model behind it, to the extent there's any. The Hades one looks pretty tight relatively, and we'll get into more of that. It's tighter than most multiplayer games that I've worked on, that I tried to model, which is one, kind of a shame for the multiplayer games that I'm thinking of, but also kind of remarkable for Hades. That being said, Hermes is probably the most inconsistent god, and in modeling stuff based on Hermes, it ran into a bunch of things, so I fixed a bunch of stuff, and now Forced Overtime is the highest of the hot heats, meaning it's right below stuff like EM4 and I don't know, benefits package 2, that kind of stuff. Like the really hard ones. It's not quite, it's like 0.1 points below those, but it really is significantly harder than I had mathed it out, because I was using the Hermes method for that instead of doing first principles. So now it's all first principles. I've updated the Reddit post. If you read the Reddit post, if you haven't, you can Google the Reddit post too. And I linked it in the video in my Pact of Punishment video. Anyway, just wanted to let you guys know there was an update. That's the only update so far for the Hades Pact of Punishment tier list. And to the extent that it gets updated again, it will be because I've changed more stuff that I was relying on the Supergiant Games boon system for into first principles. But it would be like very specific things, right? Like, because most of the big ones like damage, now even attack speed, and run speed, actually. I freaking did run speed because I just did all the Hermes stuff. Like, I got so disillusioned with Hermes being a good barometer for how much things are worth, that I just kind of I sunk quite a few hours into it, and I did all the Hermes stuff that was relevant. And I mean, it didn't affect the Pact of Punishment heat stuff very much, but it affected a bunch of other stuff. So I'm glad I did that video first. Anyway, as a side note, if you are meeting up with Hermes and you're trying to take one of the boons, the attack speed boons are terrible. You have to use your damage output, or just general usage of, let's say you want to up the attack speed of your attack, or the attack speed of your special. You have to use that thing more than 50% of the time to deal to get its value, basically. So compared to other boons, it's really terrible, because there's a whole system. Like you're much better off. Like, let's say I think I use my attack a lot, right? So attack speed is good. Like, you often don't get a choice. But if, let's say, hypothetically there's a choice between the Hermes boon that gives attack speed and the and like a equivalent chaos boon that gives damage, the chaos boon that gives damage is like doubly as good as the Hermes boon that gives attack speed. And that holds true even if you have a stackable boon. Less true, but still true, even if you have a stackable boon, like stacking Ares or Zeus, which is silly. Like, that just shouldn't be the case. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent. Don't take attack speed ones unless you're a hyper-focused build on one particular move set, or your other options from Hermes suck, right? Or you don't care about it. But yeah, so that's fixed. Moving on, we are going to look at keepsakes today. But before we look at keepsakes, I mean, here, hold on. If you guys don't know, this video is not edited. We don't have the resources to get these hour-long videos edited, and I generally keep talking. There's like, it wouldn't be much editing, right? Like, I'm pretty good at staying somewhat relevant and interesting. All right, here we go. Here's the keepsake box. As you can see, I have thoroughly beaten the game, gotten everybody's affections to full. If you're wondering what all the little symbols next to the keepsakes are, you get one of those whenever you max out someone's like bond with you by, like, you know, giving them nectars and whatever the super powerful nectars are. And the bottom stuff is companions, which if you haven't unlocked yet, you will. They're like summons. You can summon them a couple times a run. But we're not talking about companions today. We are going to just talk about keepsakes. Before we get to keepsakes, I did say at some point that I was going to do a mirror tier list, potentially. We're not doing that anymore, at least right now. I don't think we are, because I've algorithmed the mirror out as much as I can. I could not mirror algorithm out Stubborn Defiance. That was too hard. I don't even have an idea of how to start with that one. And also Stygian Soul was way too hard. Again, I don't know where to start with that. So those two aside, all the other mirror ones are like super balanced. Like, they're the most balanced choice options ever. going from like the higher option to the lower option never goes over like 10% value. It's just absolutely ridiculous, and most of them are like just almost identical in terms of values. They did a really good job with the two sides of the mirror. Obviously, not all mirror things are worth the same, but your choices are all worth the same. So if you have a choice between one side of the mirror or the other side of the mirror, pick the one that seems like it's synergizing the most with whatever the hell you are doing with your weapon or your weapon aspect or your general playstyle, because it is otherwise balanced. And also heats affect that a lot. So if you like are stacking a lot of heats that, you know, make something better or something worse, you have to take that into account too. But overall, from the baseline, from the starting point at 0 heat, and your average weapon, whatever the hell that means, it's super balanced. So there's not much to talk about. There's one exception to this, and you're probably thinking of it if you're like, ADWCTA, you're crazy. There's no way the mirror is super balanced. I have one example. You probably have more than one example. But the real story here is probably that if you think 5 things in the mirror are unbalanced, I think you're wrong. And that most of the things you think are unbalanced are just things that are going against your playstyle, and they're actually balanced. So we can talk about that. But the one that actually is like bad is high confidence. And we all know high confidence is bad. You don't need me to tell you that. Thick skin is way better. It doesn't matter what your playstyle is. I guess if you want to do a speed run, high confidence is good, but that's like very particular, right? That's not like about beating the game or like raising heat or anything. So I think that's why high confidence exists. It's like just for speedrunners, and if you are a normal human being, you should just take thick skin, but you knew that. The story is that the other stuff, like the stuff that I keep reading people say that they suck, like Fiery Presence over the backstab one. Fiery Presence is the one for your first hit on an undamaged minion. Ruthless Reflex over the double dash. Abyssal Blood over the one that gives you 50% more damage on attack and special. Abyssal Blood is the one that slows the opponent down. Family Favorite over... crap, why am I forgetting that? Over the 40% damage increase if you stack two status effects on it. Fated Authority versus Persuasion. Those are all nearly identical in value. So whichever one of those that you think is significantly worse than the others, and I know people have like a lot of opinions on this, I think you're totally wrong, and I think the math proves you wrong. They're pretty balanced. Not even pretty balanced. They're like very balanced. Like you rarely see balance this good in a video game. Anyway, I may go over that in some other video later, but there's just not much to present in terms of like, oh, you should do this instead of that. Like, no, you do whatever you want because the mirror is freaking balanced. Just don't take high confidence unless you're doing a speed run. Okay, so we are now at the keepsakes. Let me put this on. I'm just gonna show you the whole keepsake tier list right off the bat because I don't have a good way of. It's hard to do tier lists for this kind of stuff. So I'm just gonna show it all to you. There's that. Here's this. Okay, that's the whole tier list. If you notice, it's complicated. It's complicated for a reason because it's the keepsakes. You're switching your keepsakes each time. So I've split it up into kind of 4 different concepts, right? And then I'll talk about high heat considerations at the end. But right now we're starting this as if you are on 0 heat with the average weapon and, you know, the average mirror choices, whatever that means. So start is your first one. That's Tartarus. Always Tartarus. Always start. End is hopefully assuming that you plan on this run, you plan to beat Hades in this run. End is Temple of Styx. It's the last one that you go. But end is really any act in the middle, like any biome in the middle that you think you might die or like almost die, like fully die. All your death defiance is gone, you know, all that stuff. Also, this assumes you're using like normal death defiance, not stubborn defiance. Again, I'll talk about stubborn defiance at high heat at the end. But I'm assuming you're not stubborn defiance because stubborn defiance is good for high heat runs, and that's kind of it. It's in its own category. So we'll talk about that afterwards. I did math stuff out for that too. But this assumes normal death defiances, which is very, very important for a number of these. So anyway, so if you're doing the run and then you think Temple of Styx is super easy, you never die there, you can get to Temple of Styx with no death defiances and half your health, and you're going to end up beating Hades anyway, you're 100% sure. But like somehow Theseus and Asterius, you put EM3 on, and I don't know, you just have a lot of trouble with it, and you die there way more than Hades. Well, then for you, Elysium would be part of End as well, right? There's nothing special about Temple of Styx. Mid is usually Asphodel and Elysium, but again, like End could stretch into it, right? And conversely, if you're a player that has like not beaten Hades yet, or like you're not often able to beat Hades, and you're just kind of looking to like get to Hades or something, then End is also earlier, right? Like if you die on learning a lot, then learning is your end. This is important mostly because whenever I categorize End, I plan on you losing all of your health. So that obviously matters compared to stuff that I consider mid or start, where I'm thinking that like you use up like 1 death defiance max, right? Like on average. I'm just going by averages here. Like, yeah, sometimes we lose 2 death defiances in Elysium, or we have a really terrible like time at Asphodel. We do it and then we kind of recover later on. But we also have some times where we don't use any death defiance, right? So just the average. Okay, so that's what start, mid, and end mean. And full run means you don't change. It means you just start at it and then you don't change. You go the full entire run. I actually noticed that these numbers are not the correct numbers because at some point I doubled everything. Don't ask me why, it gets a little complicated. But this way, so I also calculate things in B, which is the value of, and I'm trying to keep this stable because at some point internally I change what B means, which I know is terrible practice. But it's just easier for your for your unit of measurement to be one thing when calculating some things and a different thing when calculating something else. But when you're like trying to create an overall system to present to people, your unit evaluation B should be the same. So my unit evaluation B is the value of a boon, a rare boon, in the very first chamber. That's what I settled on. All right. There we go. Okay. So yeah, that's what B means. So all these numbers that you see, if I say it's 1, that means it's the equivalent of getting 1 boon. And each of these measurements for start, mid, and end just counts 1 biome. So if you have 2 biomes that are mid, like Asphodel and Elysium usually, then you can, you get that valuation each time you pick it. If you and for the full run, that's the whole thing. Okay. All right. So let's start with the beginning. Let's just go down the line. I'm going to look at the boons the keepsakes one by one, and kind of tell you how I play with them, some like how they're used and where they are on the tier list in each of these. So the first one I just want to cover right off the bat because they're very special are the Olympian boons. You have Zeus, Poseidon, Artemis, Aphrodite, Ares, Artemis, Dio, and Poseidon. This one over here that I skipped over is Hermes. It's something totally different. So these I call Olympian. They are the Olympian keepsakes. All of them do the same thing, which is the first time you use it in a run, it makes sure that the next god boon that you're going to get is going to be from that particular god that you like have the keepsake of. And then you get plus 20% that it is rare. That plus 20% goes on for the entirety of however long you have it equipped. But the main effect, the one you're really using these guys for, is to kind of direct your build. 2 things about that. One, directing your build is incredibly powerful. And it is even more powerful later on when your build is already going in a direction. Like having an extra direction or filling in a piece in your build or giving you an extra roll into that legendary that completes your build and makes your build twice as good is kind of insanely good. But that happens less often than you think. Most of the time, between the fact that this is still RNG and the fact that, remember, anytime you're using one of these, you are effectively replacing another god. Or sometimes the game was going to give you, like if I pick Demeter, the game might have been wanting to give me Demeter anyway, and now this is going to just be part of the keepsake thing. It's not going to give you like an extra Demeter, right? Like that's not, it will often do that because oftentimes the first god you see won't be Demeter. In fact, normally you have a stable of 4 gods plus Hermes, and Hermes doesn't count as part of this. So your first god, if it's Hermes, it's still going to be Hermes. So set Hermes aside. Normally you have a rotation of 4 gods that the game throws at you, which means 25% of the time you were going to get this anyway. So just letting you guys know, like 25% of the time, the part of this keepsake does nothing except give you 20% more chance of getting the rare boon when you use Demeter. So I don't think a lot of people consider that. Also, a lot of the times when you're making a build, what you really want is like a duo boon or something, and then that means 50% of the time you'll be fine. And instead, you're forcing this like one. Like it's not as valuable as people think. I feel like there's this default mentality in Hades players to like just use the Olympian boons. Like it's cool, right? Like to have really powerful builds, and but in terms of value, it's not that valuable. So if you look at where Olympian boons are on this list, it's under okay to start. And that's the most powerful it ever gets. So I want that to sink in. Most players in Hades, I think, use Olympian boons most of the time. I do as well. But that's not, strictly speaking, correct. And it's definitely not correct once you start taking approval process, which limits your ability to control your build. And it's not correct. It would be even less correct when you start shutting down the mirrors, and that means you have less god boons to begin with to be able to direct your build. It's even less correct when you start putting on a lot of convenience fee heats, and then you can't afford all those Charon shops that they gave you extra free bonus boons to like help you direct your build. The Charon shop, I keep saying this because I don't think enough people know it. The Charon shop god boons are free. They don't count towards the god boons the game has already given you, which means there's this system that goes on where the chambers try to balance you out between giving you meta stuff, which is like, I don't know, gems and like keys and stuff like that, and giving you stuff that actually helps you in the run, whether it's like hearts or gold or hammers or god boons. So if you're in a Charon shop, you get free stuff. Like you have to pay money for it, but it doesn't count as the game having given you that boon. So each thing you buy from Charon is worth like 1.5, roughly, not quite 1.5, more like ends up being like 1.4, a little below 1.4, actually, like 1.38 or something of a boon compared to if you get it for free. Anyway, my whole point is that as you increase the mirror, like half of the mirror is about, not more than half the mirror, like maybe 2/3 of the mirror is about making your opponents like be beefier and harder, but then 1/3 of your mirror, usually the easier 1/3, I think, is about making your build crappier. So once you start taking the stuff that makes your build crappier, it like starts really not making sense to take these Olympian boons. So anyway, Olympian boons start out as okay, and then in Asphodel and Elysium, they are actually moved into the bad category. You'll see why I don't necessarily mind taking Olympian boons even in Asphodel and Elysium, mostly because there's just not a lot of good stuff you can do in Asphodel and Elysium. It's kind of like it's one of those like, well, this is one of your least bad options. All right. Yeah, so that's the Olympian boons. And then for the end, on the Temple of Styx, or whenever you end your game, obviously don't take an Olympic boon because it's bad. I don't know, like you just have better options. And for a full run, because your Olympian boons only trigger once So the rest of the run, all you're getting is that 20% extra bonus to be rare. So don't do that. It's actually the worst boon, right? If you look at the full run, it's literally your worst option to keep a boon like this for the entire run. But that should be obvious because its effect triggers only once. Oh, it's not literally the worst. I didn't put purse up there. Did I just forget purse? No, I didn't forget purse. Purse is under all... No, purse shouldn't be under all others. Purse is... yeah, so I didn't put purse in the final run one. I guess I just didn't, like, bother with it. But, yeah. Purse would be the same as there. I'll put it in right now. Just so we have it here. So, what's the purse value? Give me 1 second. I'm going to go find the purse value in my list here. Purse 1. Where is this? Why can't I find it? Yeah, okay. Purse 1 is 0.5. So it would be 0.5. Okay. So it would be same. So purse would be equally as bad as Olympian. We'll get to that though. But that's how bad Olympian is, right? You would never keep purse the entire time because you get all the value out of purse in the very beginning. But that's how bad Olympian is to keep around the entire time. Just thought that was interesting, and I wanted to start off with that. So Olympian's not that hot. Consider doing something else. But then I'll explain why it's kind of hard to do other stuff. Okay. Now, let's talk about the other ones that are good to start with. So we started with purse. We're already talking about it. Let's talk about purse. Purse is Hypnosis Keepsake, and it gives you 150 gold. Just one time. You can only use it one time. You really want to switch off this Keepsake after you use it once. Usually people take it in the beginning, and that's because, as you see on the tier list, it is one of the best things you can take in the beginning. I mean, it is the best thing you can take in the beginning. So take it in the beginning. That being said, if you are enabling convenience fee, it obviously hurts the value of this. But even with max convenience fee, purse is still like one of your best options. Like if you max convenience fee, then purse is about the same as starting off with like an Olympian boon, with an Olympian one. And Pom starts being better than purse. So that's really the only difference there. There's not much to say about it. It's pretty straightforward. Something to note is that if you start off with Pom or you start off with something else that's not purse, putting purse in the mid game is still better than an Olympian boon. So like if you don't have convenience fee on, get purse into your build at some point. Purse is good. Everyone should have purse as one of their keepsakes at some point, unless they're doing butterfly or plume, which requires you to have it the entire time. I don't know, or they have convenience fee on, right? If they have convenience fee high, that's also bad for purse. So that's it. Pretty easy. The other option you have to start in the beginning is, spoiler alert, Pom Blossom. The Pom Blossom is from, again, spoiler alert, although if you're watching these kinds of endgame discussion videos, it's lots of spoilers, right? Your mother gives you this, and it gives you, every 4 encounters, it gives you a slice of Pom Blossom, like automatically. So you don't get to pick which boon you get the Pom on, but you're getting it. Reasonably speaking, most of the time in Tartarus you can get 3. So these are encounter based, not room based, not chamber based. So if you like see too many wells, or if you go see Charon too many times, you won't be able to get it. Or if you go to the like exclamation point rooms, right? They all don't have encounters in them. So if you kind of just go straight forward, you can do 1 non-encounter room in Tartarus and still end up with 3 slices, which is really good if you get 3 slices. I think at 3 slices, you end up you end up better than purse would be. But you're not guaranteed 3, because you're only going to run into one fountain, but you may be forced into a extra Charon room, right? You may want to say like, oh, I never want to go to Charon or the exclamation point rooms and see boldly, but you may not have that choice, and then that just screws your whole thing over, and then you only get 2. And if you only get 2, it's not as good as purse. So overall, it's kind of balanced with purse in Act 1. But if you look at mid, Pom is down in bad with the Olympian boons, because Asphodel only has 8 rooms. Am I even thinking about this right? Yeah, Asphodel only has 8 rooms that you can possibly have encounters in. So if you go through full Asphodel and you don't go to the middle Charon shops, and you don't go to any exclamation point rooms, then you will get your 2 Pom Blossoms, but you have no chance of getting 3 Pom Blossoms, and you are quite likely to not even be able to get 2. So Asphodel is absolutely terrible for Pom. Elysium is a bit better. You still can't get 3 in Elysium. Yeah, I think it's not possible to get 3 in Elysium. But you're very likely to get 2. You're almost guaranteed to get 2. You have to do really weird stuff to not get 2 in Elysium. But that's why it's in mid. Also, with any kind of things that give you a permanent upgrade, the earlier you get it, the better, right? So, anyway, point is, Pom great in the first room. After the first room, not so much. And then if you look at the last room actually is pretty good. The end. For the end here, I just assume you're in Temple of Styx for the Pom, and Pom gains a little bit more value because you're in the end game and you have the Temple of Styx many rooms, so that'll get your Pom built up pretty quickly. You can actually get a lot of it. Like if your whole entire goal is to go through every single room, and you have like a build that's really good at Temple of Styx, or you have some way to heal or something, then the Pom can be amazing. But in normal play, the Pom is in 4 is a little subpar compared to the other ones. But it's an option, right? It's okay. It's not a terrible idea the way it is in mid. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is something else that is better going to start with and then gets bad later on, and that is Shackles. So Shackles is given to you by Sisyphus, and it gives you plus 100% damage to your attack, special, and cast when not empowered by a boon. Obviously, it's better in the early going because you will eventually take attack, special, and cast boons. Now, plus 100% damage is actually, frankly, better than the vast majority of boons that you can get on attack, special, and cast. Like, honestly. The problem is it takes up a keepsake slot the entire time if you're going to keep doing this, and more importantly, this is really the reason why it sucks, is when you have this equipped, you're still going to get offered attack, special, and cast boons, and then you can't take them, and then they take up slots. You can take them, but then you lose the effect of the boon and of the keepsake, and the keepsake gets worse, right? So unless you're doing like a no Olympian run, which I know some people do, they try to get the dad with no Olympian boons as kind of a challenge, and because there's a special voice line for it at the end. But unless you're doing that, you don't want it past the first one. Like you see it at the very bottom for both mid and end as being just really bad. For a full run, it's actually not the worst. I mean, it's terrible. You still shouldn't do it, right? It's under bad. But it's around the same as where Purse and Olympian is if you use them for full runs. But unlike Olympian and Purse, Shackles, some people actually do use for a full run. No one uses Purse or an Olympian boon for a full run. But it's a challenge, right? Because it's just not that good. But For the first act, it's doable. For the first for Tartarus, we have it under okay. It's about as good as starting with an Olympian boon, which people do. The problem with this, and we'll start talking about the other ones as well afterwards, the other ones that you see in good and okay. The problem with this is that it kind of assumes that you need to deal a lot of damage in Tartarus, and that may be the case if you're going for tight deadline stuff. Like, it'll help you pick up some time and bank some time. But I think for the most part, most people who are playing this game, you're trying to end up beating the game, which means Tartarus is pretty easy for you, and you want to use your Keepsake in Tartarus to buff the rest of your run, right? The good thing about, like, anything that powers you up for this, for Tartarus, but doesn't stay with you, like, so Purse, Olympian, Pom, and Egg aside, and like Hourglass kind of half, is kind of wasted if you think you're going to get out of Tartarus with basically full health anyway. Everything else just effectively gives you a little bit of health, or a lot of health if you suck more, right? So it kind of all depends on how good you are in Tartarus, like how much use you're actually going to get out of Shackles. But mathematically, Shackles is not bad for Tartarus, for like the average player that's going to beat Hades in this run. It really isn't, because it'll save you a decent chunk of health. Now, it's not as good as Purse, it's not as good as Pom, but it's about as good as starting with the Olympian of your choice. The other one that the final one that people sometimes take, I don't know a lot of people that do this, but it is an option. It is the Cosmic Egg, which is given to you by Chaos. The egg just generally is not that good of a keepsake. It's rated bad, and then it's rated bad again for mid, and then for end, it doesn't do anything, so it's rated terrible. There's no Chaos things in the Temple of Styx. Just math-wise, it doesn't quite get to an Olympian boon's value. It also doesn't guarantee you a Chaos thing. So if you're unlucky, you can equip this and it'll do nothing. And that's happened to me before, where I equip it and it does nothing for the entirety of Tartarus. And I'm like, well, just wasted that whole entire keepsake thing. The plus 40% to be rare or better is quite significant, actually, especially because Chaos boons are better in terms of the final effect than regular Olympian boons. So making them rare is usually a multiplier on it, and it makes it like even better. So there is something to be said about that. And then you avoid losing health, but it's like 20-25 health. It's not really that big of a deal. You can use the wells to buy more Chaos Gates, and then you could potentially get 2 of these. You could even just naturally see 2 of these in one biome, 2 Chaos Gates, and then you really rack up the value. But overall, there's a lot of RNG in this, and your chances to high roll is very low in terms of seeing 2 of the Cosmic Eggs. 2 of the Chaos Gates. So yeah, it's not, I would never recommend using this one, even if you have a build that requires you to go look at Chaos Gates. Because usually, if you have a build that requires you to use Chaos Gates, you're in a cast build, and what you're really looking for is that extra crystal, and the extra crystal doesn't benefit from the rarity. You get 1 extra cast crystal, no matter what rarity that Chaos boon is. So this one's pretty much a never take. Although mathematically, it's just bad. It's not terrible. Yeah. Okay. So the other ones that make an appearance in the start are the other ones that make an appearance in the start are Duster and Collar. So let's do Duster first, because it's very straightforward, and I might as well just talk about it. Duster is rated okay. I feel like no one ever takes Duster, but mathematically, Duster's not bad. It's rated okay in start, it's rated okay in mid, it's rated okay in the end. Although if you notice, by the end, there's actually a lot of great ones, so Duster is going to get outshadowed for Temple of Styx. But in mid and in the beginning, Duster is a viable option. It's never the best option. It could be the best option for you, but it's not like mathematically the best option overall. But it's kind of close. It's usually vying for position with other stuff that you would normally take in a normal run, even if you would never take Duster. So one thing that's bad about Duster is that in Hell mode, you are forced to take Lasting Consequences 1, which reduces the value of Duster by 25%, and immediately moves it down from okay to bad, which means you shouldn't be taking it. So, sorry, like, I started the game on Hell mode, and so Duster was never that great for me. But if you need health, right, because all it does is give you health. It doesn't give you max health, so you need to actually get hurt. So it's kind of designed for players that are struggling in the middle of the game, which is why no one takes it. Because usually the players that I'm talking to are players who are like doing their bounties, or they've like already beaten Hades. But if you are kind of just playing the game like normally, or like trying to get to Hades and trying to beat Hades for the first time, or you still fail at beating Hades even though you've beaten him before, Duster in start and definitely in mid is a pretty good option. It heals you up, keeps you healthy, allows you to get to the Temple of Styx with full health, or like all your Death Defiances or whatever, and like sets you up really well. It's worth a consideration. Don't let the good players, like the really good players, the really experienced players, the players who are on Hell mode, like, you know, who are like, Duster, what the hell? Don't let them discourage you from taking Duster. It's useful for players in progress, like on the way to becoming a good and experienced player. At a certain point, you'll just never take Duster again, but it has its uses. Like, I can see the design. It's not like underpowered, right? You actually wouldn't want to make it even more overpowered. Yeah, it's so good, in fact, that if you look at full run, Duster isn't great. Like, if you have to keep a keepsake and you can't switch keepsakes, you get the ability to switch keepsakes pretty early on. But let's say you just like never bought that upgrade for some reason and you just had to stick with one. Duster's really high up there, especially because then you're probably in your early game, and you probably need some health. So there's a room for Duster. Is kind of my point. Similar to that, Collar is totally doable in start and mid. In start, Collar's rated around where Duster is, around where Olympian Boons is. In mid, it's rated in the same place, right? Like above Olympians for mid. And part of it is that 50 health is 50 health, right? That's just gonna, like, unless you're entering Styx with full health, that 50, or like, sorry, unless you're entering, yeah, I mean, kind of, but unless you're entering the boss of the third biome, Theseus and Asterius, with full health, then this is just 50 extra health, and it also makes all of your healing within the run a little bit better. Not all of your healing, but like half the healing adjusts based on your max health, so it helps with that. If you ever do lose a life in one of these mid areas, which, you know, you sometimes do, but we don't just think that you're going to blow through start and mid, right? We think that there's a chance in mid that you know, somehow die or get an unlucky roll or whatever, lose your focus. You're going to get an extra 25% health, so that's an extra 25 health on your Death Defiance from it. And by taking this, you will also so you can also switch your keepsake either before you drink the well or after you drink the well. So if you don't use Collar in Act 1, and you just, like, let's say you start using it in Act 3 in Elysium, then you get to drink the upgraded well, the one that's between Act 2 and Act 3, that's between Asphodel and Elysium, and you get to drink the upgraded well again between Elysium and Styx. Like, that all adds up, because the well is, I think, normally like 40% of your health, so that's an extra, I don't know, like 16 or something, 15? I don't know. Yeah, 15. No, 10. That's an extra 10 health on each of the wells, so that's an extra 20 health on top of that. So it's a little hidden and a little iffy, but there's a lot of ways that the collar in the middle of the game just kind of gives you extra health. It puts it on par with Duster in the mid game. Now, at the end game, in Temple of Styx, unlike Duster, which kind of does the same thing, Collar actually becomes great. It's actually one of the best things you can take. This is assuming you have your Death Defiances, or you think that you will likely end with Death Defiances. If you have 2, that's fine, but it really shines if you have 3. And that's because Collar gives you 100 health if you have 2, and 125 health if you have 3. And that's just kind of a lot of extra max health to go into Hades. It also, again, makes that last 2 fountains extra good, right? And especially that very last fountain, it matters because it affects your max health essentially for going to that Hades fight. So again, like Collars has a lot of hidden ways of helping you out with your health pool, and it is really one of the best things to switch to at the very end. I find myself switching to it almost all the time, and I'm in hell mode, so I already have 1 rank of hard labor in. And as you'll see when we talk about like high-end heats, the more hard labor you do, the more things start getting really skewed. Like eventually, like spoilers for the rest of the video, I guess, eventually Acorn is just going to beat everything else, which I think tracks the experience of high heat players and why they use Acorn. It's mathematically, it's just better. Because Collar stays the same, but the amount of damage you prevent with Acorn skyrockets based on your hard labor. But anyway, at 0 heat or just like no hard labor, Collar is one of the best things you can do. What else is over here in start? Okay, let's talk about memory. Distant memory is what Orpheus gives you, which is kind of weird. I don't know why Orpheus cares about distant foes. Maybe he was an archer in the mythology. I don't know. It's plus 30% damage to distant foes. This has an asterisk only because you only want to pick it if you're using bow or rail, or you're using spear and you got the extending jab upgrade. All the other weapons don't even think about this. Should be obvious. Why? Because you're not damaging distant foes. Or at least a lot of your tool set is not damaging distant foes. Like maybe you could do some weird cast build that only damages distant foes, but generally speaking, a lot of your options don't damage distant foes. Memory is going to be very high. It's good in start and mid, and that is the highest start and mid gets. It is in great in end, and if you took a full run and just did memory, it is still up there in the great category. I think it gets underused, and there's an asterisk also because well, that's not why there's an asterisk, but if you put forced overtime on, this gets a lot worse, right? Because people can close the distance to you much faster. But if you are able to maintain the spacing, and you are if you're not using forced overtime, or you should be able to if you're not using forced overtime, this is a lot of extra damage. And extra damage, this is just extra damage, right? Like it'll track all of your god boons, like dooms and like whatever, lightning. It'll buff your Artemis aid, your Aphrodite's aid, like whatever, right? It'll buff all the stuff. So very flexible. You have to be using the right weapon, and you have to not have forced overtime on, and you have to be good at keeping distance. But the numbers are kind of insane if you are. And yes, I'm not considering that you are always going to get this 30%. Within the model, it builds in, like, the model knows stuff like range, like area, like distance, like run speed, like attack speed, and how much distance you can get from enemies and how fast they move and stuff. A lot of it is assumptions based on like a certain number of enemies. I didn't like pool all the enemy types and like measure them all, but I measured a few that I think were like normal enemies for each biome, and so I know their like speeds and their attack speeds and their like attack patterns and stuff. So yeah, I think this is one of the underrated ones. I don't see a lot of people using it, but it is it's definitely something to try. And it's kind of an expert's pick, with the problem being that experts generally play with forced overtime 2, which makes it significantly worse. Not that forced overtime 2 makes it a non-consideration. I'm gonna go look at forced overtime 2. Okay, it kind of makes it a non-consideration. Forced overtime 2 reduces this effectiveness by 33%, which kind of pushes it down 1, right? And so it's still doable. Yeah, it's still doable. Like, you'd still be able to use memory to start and for mid. And in the end, it wouldn't be the best one anymore, but it'll be in that second tier. Yeah, it'll be in the low second tier. So, still usable. Even in forced overtime 2, just not like great anymore. So, that's memory. The one other that shows up is Hourglass in the beginning. I put Hourglass here because Hourglass kind of jumps around, and I just wanted to track where Hourglass is. Hourglass starts off low, then jumps up to good, and then becomes bad again for Styx. It's bad for Styx because there's a lot of rooms, and because there's a lot of rooms, you don't necessarily know when Hades is going to be. So it also cuts you off after Hades. You don't get any benefits from it after Hades, whereas the other ones you would. It continues on. It's bad to start because you don't get your first well. So if you use it in mid, you can get a well in the beginning, and then throughout your whatever area you're in, you may get another well or 2 wells or however many wells you see. And then when you're entering the next biome, there's still another well there that you can pick up before you switch off your keepsake. So if you use it in Asphodel or Elysium, which is really when you should use it, you get like a bonus well of Charon basically to use. And that really bumps up the value of Hourglass. Of course, there's a lot of RNG to it, and you have to like really feel like, if I dealt more damage or move faster or got like the healing one that has encounter times, that has an encounter range, that it would save me some health. Like, that has to be a consideration. It's the same with Collar and Duster, right? Like, these are only useful if you're not like going through ending with full health and just like kind of like rocking it. So if there is a mid and you are having some trouble, like you're not really in danger of losing the run in mid, but you could arrive at Temple of Styx like significantly damaged, and that damage, in that case, Hourglass is the best. It's good, but there's nothing else competing with it. It's Hourglass or Memory. That's all you have in mid. So I thought Hourglass was a very interesting thing after I mapped it out. It's actually very good in mid. Of course, if you're looking at it from a high heat perspective, convenience fee again shuts it down. This is why I hate convenience fee. It shuts so many of the otherwise really good things down, not just in terms of keepsakes, but in terms of just general strategies and your other heats. Like you put convenience, like one of the easiest heats is Underworld Customs, but then you put convenience fee on it, and Underworld Customs stops being a super heat, like a free heat almost, and becomes like a medium-ish kind of heat. It affects so many things. Convenience fee. So even though we think of it as a relatively easy heat, not the easiest, but relatively easy, I just hate taking it. Because I spent so much of my strategy depends on me exchanging gold for stuff, like in an intelligent way. Anyway, Hourglass, if you're not putting convenience fee on, super high. Okay, so if you look at the start column, all the other ones are in bad. So it's not like Hourglasses or Egg are particularly notable. I just wanted to track where they are. Tooth. Let's talk about Tooth. Tooth is Skelly's. Gives you another Death Defiance, but you only get 100 hearts from it. This triggers after all your other Death Defiances are gone. So basically, it doesn't do anything until the end. But in the end, it's pretty good. It's up there with Collar in terms of how much ultimate effective health it ends up giving you. If you just want to do a really quick math, Collar is going to give you more health. If you have 3 Death Defiances, Collar is going to give you a little more healing, but otherwise have the same amount of health if you have 2 Death Defiances. Although Tooth does get that extra bonus health of whatever you know, because it's a Death Defiance, so that last hit you don't take that damage. So maybe that's worth it for the healing, but I think usually Collar wins out by like a little tiny bit, but they're basically the same if you have 2 Death Defiances. And if you only have 1 Death Defiance or no Death Defiance, then Tooth becomes better than Collar, and they otherwise do the same thing. Not anything particularly notable. Wait. I need to put that here. That's my bad. Tooth is over here. Tooth is not with the all others for the full run. Okay. That is Lucky Tooth. What else? Have we covered everything? We haven't covered everything. Have we covered everything? Okay. We haven't covered the ones that you're generally only going to take at the end. So all of these other ones we're going to talk about fall under all others in the start and mid, which is to say that they are bad. They are not giving you a lot of bang for your buck. In the end, though, these kind of show their uses and become good, with one exception, which we'll go into. So the first one we'll talk about is Earring. This is one of the best keepsakes in the entire game, I think. We have it under Great at the end. Now, you don't use it in the beginning because you're not under your health limit for much of your start and mid game, so that you don't get a lot of uses out of it. But if you're running, like, say, Stubborn Defiance, then this becomes ridiculously good. And that's one of the reasons why in High Heat, this is actually better than anything else. Like, it is it tied with Acorn? Yeah, this is tied with Acorn as your basically 2 options if you're using Stubborn Defiance. It is that good. But if you're not using Stubborn Defiance, then you don't really get, you never get its value, right? It's full value if you're not using Stubborn Defiance. But even then, it's on par with Tooth and Collar and Memory if you're using ranged weapons for the final battle. Because that's the one where you could potentially lose all of your health. And if you don't lose all of your health, then it doesn't matter what you pick, right? Because you've already won. So Earring is one of the best ones. Kind of just wanted to throw it out there. We already talked about the other ones that you want to take in the end, which is Tooth and Collar and Memory. Moving on down, these options are okay. Sigil of the Dead is Hades's. It's Dad's keepsake. It's fine. It gets the job done. If you don't have, like, the problem with Hades' Sigil is that it's actually really, really good if you were not going to get an aid. But going into the Temple of Styx, you always have like 3-4 like boon options, like Olympian boon options. So in one of them, if you don't have an aid yet, you're going to get an aid. So Sigil of the Dead, like, if you actually were not going to get an aid and you don't expect to get an aid, for example, if you took AP2 approval process too as a heat, and you just have like very little control over whether you do it, and then you've just been rolling unlucky the whole time. You haven't gotten an aid, or you got an aid and at some point decided to sell it in with Underworld Customs or whatever. Then this is a very good stopgap, right? This is a very good protection. Just like we have an aid, we're going to have an aid. Having an aid is very important going to the Hades battle. But typically, this kind of just replaces a boon at the very end, an Olympian boon. It replaces it with a pretty good Olympian boon, but it's not like better than other Olympian aids. So that's why it's where it's at. The next one we'll talk about is, let's do Spear Point. I want to save Acorn. Spear Point is, like, I actually mapped this out. Like, it seems like it's hard to map out, but this is the one that gives you invincibility for like a little bit after you get hit. I don't know how this works in not Hell mode because I've only ever played Hell mode. But in Hell mode, there's personal liability, which means having something like Holy Shield is insanely useful. And similarly, having something like Spear Point is insanely useful. I imagine I'm just gonna put an asterisk on this because I'm doing this from my only, like, all my math kind of assumes personal responsibility. And I now realize that personal responsibility is a heat that not everyone's taking. So if you are taking personal responsibility and you are in Hell mode, this ends up mathing out to be pretty good. Not one of the top ones, but it will get the job done. It prevents enough damage in the end to kind of justify its existence. That being said, I don't know when you'd ever take this, because even if you don't have a Holy Shield, like Tooth and Collar are just kind of better. So I don't know. And I guess, okay, it is going to scale with hard labor, kind of in the same way Acorn does. So I can see that, yeah. So as hard labor goes up, Spear Point is going to go up too, just like Acorn. Which makes Spear Point, like for high heat runs, one of the best ones actually. For high heat runs in Hell mode, Spear Point is one of the best ones along with Acorn. It's not as good as Acorn, but it's it becomes an option. Okay, I see its role now. Because I was like, well, why would you ever like do that? But if you're not doing 5 stacks of hard labor, you're pretty much going to take Tooth or Collar over Spear Point, regardless. And then we have Bracers. Maybe you could become really, 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 really good with this Bracers and never get hit from the back. But at least for me, it's kind of a mess. Like, you'll get hit from the back sometimes. And if you get hit from the back sometimes, even if it's not a lot, then Bracers becomes not that great. If you never get hit from the back, then you can move Bracers up a notch, right? Not all damage can hit from the front. Some damage just hits from like neither the front nor the back, and then Bracers does nothing. Other damage, you can actually reduce the damage from the front. So overall, I feel like at least I haven't gotten a good enough hang of the Bracers, and I did the math based on some assumptions on how often you get hit from the front and the back, with actual math on how often the damage would not apply to Bracers anyway, and this is the result that I got. But I do concede that if you are very good with Bracers and you can make it so that you are almost never getting hit from the back and getting hit from the front hugely disproportionate amount of time, that Bracers could be better. That being said, even if Bracers were better, I don't think Bracers would ever surpass the level of Tooth and Collar and Earring. It may be able to get there, like if you're really good with Bracers. Yeah. After Bracers, okay, let's talk about Acorn. This is the second to last one that we're going to talk about. There's 3 more we haven't talked about. 2 of them I saved to the end because they're only full run available ones. But Acorn is one of the more interesting ones. It is... Why is it showing Sigil of the Dead? There we go. Acorn. It's Eurydice's, and you basically prevent 5 times of an enemy you taking damage. Sorry, enemy hitting you in the final match, in the boss match. That means the more damage the bosses do to you, or the foes do to you, the more health the more max health you essentially get with the Acorn. On 0 heat, it's okay. It's under good. It's not as good as Tooth or Collar, but on 4x hard labor, Acorn is kind of insane. Acorn becomes better than Tooth and Collar in 5-stack hard labor. In fact, Acorn is so good in 5 stacks hard labor that even Acorn 3, even in Elysium, Acorn is on par with Tooth and Collar as if it were the end, which means Acorn becomes by far the best choice for your Elysium fight. So if you're looking to really up your heat and you've somehow gotten to hard labor, you probably should have stacked a lot of other heat until up to that point. Like, you should be in 40 heat zone. In that point, you should really be I don't think there's any comparison. It would be Acorn and Earring for Elysium, and also probably for Styx as well. Like, those are your choices. All right, that's Acorn. Okay, so the last one that's not you have to keep it all game ones. The last normal one is Shawl, Black Shawl. I don't know what's going on with Black Shawl. Like, it honestly confuses me because I think, if I remember this correctly, Black Shawl got nerfed some more recently, like in the last few months. So that means that some internal data from Supergiant Games that they're collecting is showing Black Shawl to be really, really good. I don't know if that's because someone was exploiting some kind of very specific combo or something, but mathematically, and Black Shawl is a pretty basic math kind of like keepsake. Black Shawl at plus 20% damage, it just kind of doesn't cut it. It is below all of your other ones for the end. Below your Acorn, your Bracer. In terms of gaining damage, like Earring and Memory are your other ones that gain damage. And Earring and Memory are both higher, significantly higher. Earring and Memory for Temple of Styx and Hades fights are great. They're the top tier ones. Whereas Shaw is not even good. It's under okay. I don't know what's going on here. That's why I left it last. I am pretty confident in my math on this, and especially because it was such an outlier, I quadruple checked my math on this. So I don't know why this was done this way, but all I can say is I would recommend never taking this. And this also scales pretty terribly with high heat runs, because as forced overtime gets taken, people turn faster. You're less likely to get as many hits in from behind. It's one of the more annoying parts of doing forced overtime, I think. Also, your first hit is less and less, a smaller and smaller portion of the total pie of your opponent's health pool once that you have Calisthenics 2 in. So Black Shaw kind of just loses a lot of its luster. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so the last 2 are ones that you do full runs in. So these only work if you keep them on the entire time. One is Olympian Plume for dodging. If you look at the final run ones, Olympian Plume is at 1.75, which makes it beat out Duster and Memory as the one you should use for your full run if you're going to do that. But also keep in mind that its total score is 1.75, and you can quite easily, like if you just pick the best ones from start, then 2 mids, then 1 end, you can easily get above 1.75. So if you start with like a purse, that's like 0.5, and then let's say you move on to acorns or collars or memory or hourglass or whatever, you're gonna get 2 more. That is not 0.5, maybe like let's call it 0.4. 0.4 is 0.4, 0.5, 0.8, so it's 1.3. And then you end on like a tooth or a collar, and then you have over 2.0 B of value. Whereas Plume only gets you 1.75 of value. I also wrote the percentages in there. That's what I consider a reasonable percentage to get. I don't know, if you're consistently hitting above 30% Plume, maybe you can make it kind of like match what is good. If you can get Plume up to like the most insane high levels, it'll probably be better than what you can get with the other ones. So it's definitely a consideration. It also lets you just set it and forget it, which is always nice. And it provides a nice synergy base, right? Like if you're going to have a lot of dodge, you know what you're doing. Like you know what your build's going to be. So that's Plume. Like I consider it definitely an okay choice to make in the beginning of the run. But the even better choice, and again, this is a weird one, Butterfly. The numbers are so much better for Butterfly than for Plume. But I am assuming an equal percentage amount of triggers. So I'm assuming that it is as easy for you to clear whatever time limit Plume sets as not getting hit. And that's just kind of not true. But even if it were true, you have this win more problem, right? Where if you're not taking damage for like 75% of your encounters, then what does it matter what keepsake you use? You know, you're just kind of going to beat the game anyway. Like, yeah, sure, you can put Butterfly the whole way through, but you can kind of really do anything, right? So Butterfly is by far the best, and, well, asterisk. Butterfly is by far the best if you have no heat on. Yet, you somehow, and you're not taking any damage, but you somehow care about dealing even more damage, right? It's just kind of weird. It's like, at the point at which all these things trigger, you kind of don't care about what Butterfly is actually doing for you, right? Like, if you never take damage, why do you need to kill stuff faster? Like, what's the point? Maybe for speedruns, like Butterfly would be huge, like would be the winner because it lets you kill everything even faster. But for speedruns, also you might be taking damage strategically. In fact, you probably should be taking damage strategically, which means you can't use Butterfly. It's kind of a weird spot. So it is the best in no heat runs by math, but there are also a bunch of things with this one specifically that the math can't quite handle on just like what is useful, right? Like the math just knows how much damage it is giving you and how useful damage is. So that's Butterfly. But the other thing is, you may think, oh, well, I can try to do it in really, really high heat ones then, right? If I'm not, if the low heat ones don't matter. But as you get to really, really high heat, like I said, Earring and Acorn becomes so good that Earring plus like some combination of Earring and Acorn or just holding one for most of the run is going to end up being better. It's going to add up to giving you more bees than Butterfly. Even if, well, is that true? Hold on. 1.5, 1, 0.7. Okay, I take that back. It'll give you about the same as Butterfly. It'll give you actually a little bit less than Butterfly. I take that back. Butterfly will very slightly outperform. Like if you get, I think I assume that you can hit your mark on, what's 40%? 40% is 20 encounters. How many encounters do you have over the course of the game? Like less than 40, because the last room doesn't count as a lot of encounters. So I'm thinking probably like 2/3, maybe up to 75% of your encounters that you're able to trigger the butterfly and the plume in before Hades. So you would have to be at a place where you can just avoid damage really, really good. But if you can avoid damage really, really good, it might be worth it to just take the butterfly and not look back. Keeps things easy, and also is one of the highest value things you can get. And also, if you're on that high heat, you probably can't control your build as well, which means you probably have to use like a mishmash of all of your abilities rather than just like, you know, focusing on one ability that you made super strong. And butterfly's damage applies to everything, so you'll get even more use out of it. So yeah, that's kind of the whole keepsake thing. We're over an hour, but we're not even close to 2 hours, so I'll call that a half win. Hope discussing this kind of helps you guys out in thinking about how you use your keepsakes over the course of your runs. And I think one of the big points is one I made in the beginning, which is that the Olympian boon in mid-run, I use it a lot, other people use it a lot. You really should first make sure you're not getting hurt. Because if you look at the other ones that are above Olympians, right, in mid, Hourglass kind of just makes you more powerful, like temporarily. Memory makes you more powerful temporarily. Purse, you've probably already used it. But if you haven't used Purse yet in the start because you use Pom, for example, then you should use Purse now over Olympian. Collar is a health thing. Duster is a health thing. Acorn's a health thing. So all the stuff above Olympians, it assumes that you need health or to deal more damage. And the point of dealing more damage is to avoid taking damage, right? So dealing more damage is in an odd way, just another way of saving health. So you see a lot of people take Olympians in mid-game, but that's because these are probably the same people. They're either doing it wrong and they're not realizing the value of taking these other things, or they just want to have fun and people like directing their builds and the Olympians are more fun, or probably more likely is that they're good enough at the game that they don't need health. And if you don't need health, then none of the stuff up there matters, right? Then you might as well take Olympian. It's one of the only things you can do that matters, right? And you'll see these people taking Olympian, sometimes maybe Egg and Pom now and then. But if you are not in their boat, if you do take damage and that well at the end of the act, at the end of the biome, does not heal you back up to full, or does not heal you close to full, maybe you should consider taking some of these other ones. And if you haven't taken Purse yet, definitely take Purse in one of your mid ones. That's my one of my biggest takeaways from doing the math on all of this. Also, that memory is actually really good, assuming you can stay the distance, which becomes kind of impossible for us over time. So it only gets you so far. Overall, I think if you watch this video, you watch the Pact of Punishment video, you know that I think that some parts of the Pact of Punishment is just like poorly valued and sometimes maybe purposefully so. Here, I think it's done pretty well. Like, I don't know what's happening with Shawl, because like you notice where it says all others on full run, and not only does it say all others, this is 1.0 after all others. That's because there's like 8 keepsakes that all have the same identical, like down to the decimal point value. And they do like very different things. Like, that's how balanced the keepsakes are, generally speaking. Like, you almost never see this in a game. I've modeled a number of single player games before for my own amusement. You almost never see like everything coming out so mathematically precise. But for keepsakes, they do. And for the mirror, they did. So, like, kudos to whoever at Supergiant Games is doing the mathematical modeling behind this. Or maybe they've just, like, tested it and, like, early access tested it for so many iterations that they've, like, figured this out through trial and error that, on mathing. But it really is quite an accomplishment. And it also makes some of this other stuff stand out more, right? Especially Shaw. Like, I think they're just undervaluing Shaw, or there's something I'm missing in terms of some combo, like one particular combo. Like, the algorithm isn't going to figure out any specific combos that will break the game, right? So maybe that's what's forcing Shawl to be lower than it mathematically should be, because it was mathematically fine. It was actually even a little mathematically lower than the others, even at 25%. And then they nerfed it to 20% for some reason. Like, it's still super interesting to me when things like that happen. Oh yeah, high heat considerations. So I kind of worked in high heat considerations within the scope of the video, but the big things to know in high heat considerations is once you put on Stubborn Defiance and you remove all the healing, obviously you can't take anything that heals anymore, like Duster, but also Memory with Forced Overtime gets knocked down, not terribly, but it gets knocked down quite a bit. Earring goes up, we've covered that. Acorn freaking skyrockets to be like better than all the ones you see out there, whereas it was only middling before. Earring goes up as well, like I said, but not as much as Acorn goes up, so Earring and Acorn become kind of tied as like the two that you should take if you're on super high heat and Stubborn Defiance. Collar becomes a never take, should kind of go without saying, but when you have fewer Death Defiances, having a little bit of extra health doesn't really matter, unless you're like dying in Tartarus or something, right? Then you take it earlier on. As for the start, this part I haven't covered. So for the start of the game, if you're on super high heat, Egg, Olympian, Purse, Shackles are all kind of equal. But the one thing that keeps its value that's better than all these other things that people normally start with is Pom. So I think the problem with taking Pom is that you're only able to take one free room, and if you're putting all the heat on, you probably want to take all the free rooms you can. So I'm putting this with an asterisk, but even if you only end up with two Pom slices, you should still take Pom over these other ones if you're on like basically like nearly full heat. And if you end up with 3 Pom slices, then you've like super won in terms of the best starting keepsake. And that goes on to like Pom keeps its value more than the other things, even in the mid. But I feel like on very high heat there is no mid, right? I feel like on very high heat you have a starting, and I don't know, maybe even starting's not starting. Maybe Tartarus is even hard on very high heat. I don't really know, but I feel like every single biome on very high heat is end. So yeah, like on very high heat, you may also just want to, I don't know, equip Memory or like equip Earring and just like let it do its job, right? So if you're looking for suggestions that, you know, someone with no experience at super high heat but who has done this mathematical model is going to recommend, I would say probably start with Pom 1 and then switch over to Earring or Acorn. Probably Earring for Asphodel, and then I would probably just keep Earring on, but you could switch to Acorn in Styx for the Hades match, and the numbers will not disagree with you. Yeah, so that's it for this video. We got it under 130. I'm pretty happy about that. I know when I was saying I was going to keep it under an hour, inside my head I'm like, I'm probably not going to be able to keep it under an hour. Thank you guys for watching. If you watched it this far, hit the like button. If you're here for the possibly Hearthstone content, obviously you should have subscribed already. But if you're here for the Hades content, subscribe. We're going to do one more video, and I promise it will be something, because that video may be 3 hours. I don't know if I can even keep that under 2 hours, because we're going to go through every single weapon aspect and every single weapon, and we're going to figure out kind of how good each weapon is relative to the other ones and each weapon aspect. I'm not going to layer hammers on top of it, because I've done the math on the hammers. I've only done it for 2. I haven't put all of them in. I did it for, I think, like sword and spear, and they're all like pretty even. Like, you're not going to gain that much. Like, they're all pretty balanced, actually. There are like literally 0 outliers. They're all within 25% value of each other. So yeah, some are better than others. but not by that much. Definitely within a range that I'm like personal preference and or your boon setup will probably decide which one's actually better. It's the same reason why I'm not going to do a video on boons. Although utility boons I probably can do a video on. We'll see. Okay. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you know friends who play Hades, and like really long form discussions on this stuff, send them over. Feel free to ask questions on YouTube. Tweet the questions at me. I'm going to write another Reddit thread for this, so posting me on the Reddit thread usually gets you the response the fastest. That's something that I'll be checking up like kind of for the rest of my life probably. And yeah, if you want to see, I don't think these are going to change, but the latest version of it will always be linked in the video itself and also in that Reddit post. And the Reddit post, once it's up, will be linked in the video as well. Thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you back here for the weapon aspects and weapons ratings one. And I hope this discussion helped people. Until next time, this is ADWCTA. See you guys.